Wonder about the future and how you'll be working and learning? Welcome to You in 2042, the future of work, with your host, Danielle Wallace.
Welcome to You in 2042, the future of work. Joining me today is Niki Avraam.
Hi Danielle, it's great to be here today to talk about such a great topic. So I talk in terms of missions. My main mission is to help individuals be inspired and invigorated by the work that we do, because that's our fundamental right. That's how we exceed our potential. So I help organizations adopt what I call the ownership culture, which is empowering people to have agency over the way they work. And I'm an employment and discrimination lawyer by trade. So that journey has really now led to this, just being in the bones of organizations and having the desire to work with autonomy myself and seeing that that's how we get the best out of people.
That's an exciting journey. And as we look into that, I imagine those themes of the agency and autonomy still really might permeate, or maybe they change and shift when we look forward into the next 18 years, let's say. What changes do you think the next 18 years might bring us?
It's a big question. If I look at from a really sort of high level point of view, one of the things that I think will fundamentally shift is in terms of organizational structure. I mean, we're not just looking at technological shifts, we're also looking at the shifts in demography. I think for the first time now, we've got like 6 generations working under one roof. And that's led to a lot of changes in the way that we're working and the way that we're viewing things like hierarchy. Like there are so many companies now that talk about, like Airbnb, IBM, talk about mentern programs, as in more experienced, senior, more seasoned employees working with interns effectively, those who haven't got that wealth of experience. And they come together and they share their knowledge base and their skill base and their kind of areas of power. And that undoubtedly will lead to a different type of ecosystem where we're not looking necessarily at organizations where people at the top have more experience and it goes kind of top down. And we're already seeing that shift, but I think that will progress and that will really see that shift. The other thing that I'm really interested in is the shift in our approach in terms of our approach to work, professional development, and our general mindset. Just looking at AI, which is massive in itself, we could talk about it all day. I won't, because I'm not expert in it. But I mean, if we look at that, if we look at the changes that are happening in terms of entire job domains and the agents, what we call kind of agents who are taking all of those mundane tasks and the disappearance of that need for knowledge workers. If we look at all those shifts, that will mean that we have to take a different approach to professional development rather than the sort of linear, in-depth, traditional approach where we get really deep into knowledge and that learning. I think it will be one of more multifaceted, dynamic approach where we're looking at, okay, what are the things that align with our areas of expertise? How can we pivot between jobs, between industries? I think there will be a lot more around portfolio work, even if it's under those main kind of broad headings. So that will require, yes, that adaptable approach, but also a shift in terms of how we view the value that people can bring.
And I'm curious on that, with that shift to more portfolio work and even reframing the value, is it that workers in the future might be having more breadth and less depth within a specific area?
Exactly. I think that's what will be required, because that need for that in-depth knowledge is fundamentally, to some extent, being replaced. So how can we bring our humanness, kind of our human skill to it? And one of the ways, and this is a really sort of high level point, is that we'll need to also look at how we can assert our individual identities to work and leadership. That'll be fundamental, because how else do we differentiate ourselves? That's how we bring that kind of diversity of thought and experience to work alongside and adapt to all the technological shifts that are happening.
So amidst all these changes, then it sounds like a workforce revolution is already underway. and that there is changes that we'll be seeing. How does the role of the autonomy of an individual person, how might that play out then in the future?
I think in so many ways, the overarching point is how can we encourage people to develop like a personal leadership philosophy, right? That means that they are, and organizations are maximizing those, I call it the individual wisdom toolboxes, bringing the learned experience and wisdom that we all have at whatever age. And doing that, if we look at the main pillars of that, the first thing, just looking at a job role, okay, that traditionally a job role put on a contract, it's described in a certain way, and the individual is required to perform that function and carry out those duties. Job crafting, the importance of that, I think, will increase. And that is the collaboration between an individual and an organization, where they come together and look at how can we match an individual's skills, passions, and their goals to the organization's objectives. That's twofold in terms of the advantages of that. People feel that they have a personal stake in the success and the well-being of the organization, how it develops. And also it's necessary for how things evolve, because the old way of having a fixed job description is like, okay, that's a fixed thing, and then there's a fixed trajectory. That won't work going forward. Even the extent to which AI tools are adopted and adjusted, the individual doing that job has to be involved in that process. And there's so much importance around the communication that takes place between the individual and the organization. I think the importance of that will just grow. And I talk about this in 3 pillars. The second one is, and we talk a lot about working outside of our comfort zone, I call it preferred discomfort. And that's the intentional pursuit of experiences that push our boundaries and broaden our horizons that feel uncomfortable, right? Because they don't all fall under our comfort zone. So the intentional pursuit of that should be encouraged, and structure should be put in place by organizations to really encourage that collective adaptability, because that preferred discomfort muscle, that's something that if we do repeatedly in a safe to fail type of environment, that has a ripple effect. And that means the workforce is then more adaptable to internal changes, to pivoting. And that internal hiring, I think, will become more of a thing in the way that we work. And they will have to adapt to those different organizational structures. And the other thing is the agility piece, the importance, of course, of adaptability in itself. The more we have that muscle exercised, and I think the best way to do that is to be really aware of what are our core values, what are the things that we really don't want to change because they are our insides, right? Things like integrity, transparency. Once we're comfortable with that, we can be more comfortable with adapting ourselves to the changes that are happening. And again, that's something that organizations can support. I'm just looking at my note here because I made a note of Zappos that implemented something called holacracy, which is a self-management system that allows for rapid adaptation to changing market conditions. I think this is something that for a long time organizations have recognized, but the importance of it again will increase.
Those are great insights. And I can see this future as you're painting it with this matching of individual skills to the organization that based on the organization's agility, the individual's agility, but still rooted in one's own values that won't change. I think that gives people the comfort to be able to have that agility. A really interesting way of seeing work get done, as opposed to a very static situation. Okay, this is the job description. This is the anticipated career trajectory, and it's not fluid. How is that adaptable for the individual or for the organization? Yeah. And within all that world of that preferred discomfort muscle, because that then becomes something that us as individuals can embrace now, something that we can try to get more comfortable with, that preferred discomfort. So with this, what can leaders do to support their teams to be able to be in that future world?
Well, the first thing is the piece around the importance of communication. It sounds so simple, right? In all the, with all the language, with all the sort of changing language that's going around, communication is key. Just looking at something like job crafting, how do you achieve that? Well, you make it systematic in terms of having really targeted meetings and touch times with the individuals that are working in any organization. Where are they at? Even the simple question, what skills, knowledge have you got that the organization is not using? When was the last time a manager or a leader asked that question? That should be constantly asked of individuals, because otherwise they're missing out that gold dust. That requires regular meetings and touch points to look at how the two are aligning the organization's goals and their mission to the individuals, and really looking at the bigger picture. How does that role fit into the wider vision of the organization? The things around adaptability, working in our preferred discomfort. If we have organizations that are safe to fail environments, obviously that will encourage people to feel that they can experiment and learn. And the way you do that is to build really strong pillars around what underpins the organization's vision. What are the actionable principles underneath that? Communicate that, make those clear so people can maneuver between those pillars more comfortably. But the communication and having that safe to fail environment are central to those things. That's how we empower people, and that's how we encourage people to assert their identities at work.
That all is such a practical application that we can take forward as leaders to support this future-ready world. A very exciting roadmap for that, a very exciting journey. Where can people learn more about you, Niki?
So I have a website. It's nikiavraam.com. nikiavraam.com, that's 1K.
Niki, thank you so much for your time and such a fun, interesting conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. That time just whizzed past.
Thank you for being a part of the future. Subscribe now to stay current.